Chris Smit, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm very good. It's great to have you with me in the audience today. I'm always excited when I get to talk to great leaders and thinkers from around the world, and you join us from Belgium. So it's in the morning for me. It's in the evening for you,
Yep.
with a lovely time difference. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to have a discussion today about identity and culture and how that impacts leading in organizations.
Mm-hmm.
As we get
Yeah.
started, I want to share Chris's bio with the listeners. Chris Smit makes companies and organizations more aware of cultural diversity. In business, the impact of cultural differences are still underestimated. We talk a lot about globalization. The world seems to be getting smaller, and yet we all bear the mark of the culture in which we grew up. This often leads to misunderstandings that are detrimental to our businesses, and more attention to cultural diversity should be a top priority for companies and organizations. So Chris puts you on track to efficiently deal with cultural differences. Since 1993, he has advised thousands of people from more than 100 different nationalities. His work has taken him to more than 45 countries. He's a passionate and enthusiastic speaker with extensive experience in coaching and managing staff at all levels. The world in your pocket. Chris was born in Amsterdam. He has lived in 3 different countries, the US, Netherlands, Belgium, where he still lives now. As a marketing and sales consultant for Dutch airline KLM, he traveled the world. Meanwhile, he earned a master's degree in psychology at the University of Amsterdam. And in 2007, he founded the company Culture Matters. Chris helps companies working in an international context to become aware and deal with cultural differences. And I could go on and on about your background and your bio, and there's so many really fascinating and interesting things. But as someone, I like to consider myself a world traveler, and I love to travel. I love to interact with people across the globe, and yet I can't boast working with people across 100 different nationalities or 45 countries. So I have some catch-up work to do to get to your level, but I really applaud you for all the good work you do, and I think it'll be a fun discussion today to talk about culture.
Cool.
Anything that you would like to add before we launch in?
I think you've said it pretty much all. Other maybe than that I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Really, I mean, you said you read out. Started my company in 2007, which was totally not in the stars for me. I had no idea that I would be an independent consultant, etc., because I was nicely working for a Dutch consulting firm that put me in Belgium. That's the reason I moved from the Netherlands to Belgium. And then the crisis of 2007, 2008, 2009 happened. So the company that I worked for in the Netherlands went belly up, the sister company in Belgium as well. And I just started my own company. So all of a sudden I was independent and been doing this ever since and still going strong. It's a bit slow right now, which you can understand, I guess, current situation. But nonetheless, I still really enjoy the work that I do. I really enjoy standing in front of a group of people or giving a lecture or working with people, because it's people make the same mistakes time and again. So it's quite predictable how different cultures will pan out. So yeah, I really enjoy my work still.
Excellent. And yeah, so I'm curious to maybe start off there to pick your brain about some of those most common pitfalls that people just seem to slip into over and over and over again, that are pretty easily avoidable if we're just kind of paying attention to it. What would you say are maybe 2 or 3 of those most common pitfalls?
I wrote an article sometime back, 9 signs you're not getting it. It's culture, stupid. That's the title of the article. Got some good tracking with that. So I think the biggest mistake that companies make, or people in companies make, is that they do not consider culture being important. And it sort of ends up on the back burner until they bump their nose, or they stumble and fall, or they don't understand, or they are like, why are these Italians always so stupid? And says nothing about the Italians. It says everything about the non-chemistry between these 2 cultures. right? And I mean, that's one mistake. The other mistake that people tend to make as well, okay, give me an hour and I'll get it. Okay, talk to me for 1 hour and that's all I need. It can't be that difficult, right? And I think those are the biggest in terms of people don't want to invest money, but they don't mind if a project gets delayed and delayed and delayed because the Indians don't deliver what the Germans are asking for. You know, you get what you want, but you don't get what you ask for. That's usually what happens. They just don't get it. It's not the case. It's just a cultural difference, which stands in the way. That's usually what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating to me. I mean, you just point out kind of the irony of not being willing to put the time or the energy in up front so that you can have a smoother process, you know, as you're working collaboratively internationally, you know, as you continue to move forward. So so you hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and delay after delay, and miscommunication after miscommunication, and that takes a toll. It takes a toll on productivity, of course.
Of course.
It takes a toll on morale, and so the tremendous cost associated with those sorts of delays and those sorts of negative impacts. And yet, you know, companies often aren't willing to put, you know, the time and resources in up front just to make sure they're on a firm footing. And like you said, you know, so often people are like, yeah, give me the crash course. Give me, you know, I once, early on when I was doing consulting, I was meeting with a CHRO, and we were talking about some assessments that the organization needed to do. And I was explaining, you know, what I thought would be a really good systematic approach to dealing with some of the challenges that we're facing and the assessments that needed to happen. But he was pushing back, and he really wanted to, it would take a little bit more time, it'd be a little bit more expensive. And he said, no, we need to do something much faster. And so I told him, I'm like, if we do a quick and dirty version, you know, this is probably what we'll get: garbage data in, garbage data out. You know, like what you invest in up front has implications down the road. And he said, no, it's not quick and dirty, it's quick and quality. And so he was trying to frame it as though it was just as good doing the you know, the version of cutting all the corners and just doing it super fast and getting it done. He was trying to frame that as being just as good as doing like the full-blown thing. And that's just not the way it is. Now, we always have to think about cost, benefit analysis, and all of that. But if we think that we can tackle these kind of complex cultural problems in an hour-long training, that's just crazy. You just can't do it. And in fact, there's a lot of research that shows that it can actually harm. It can make things worse if you only scratch the surface and do like one of those short little brief overviews, or, you know, send everyone like a brief one sheet of like, this is the culture in Belgium versus the Italians, you know. It's overly simplistic. It's not very meaningful. And ultimately, you can actually reinforce stereotypes rather than help people have a genuine understanding of each other.
True. I have a nice story of that, about that rather, which is, and typically Americans are, with all respect, are really guilty of wanting it quick and quality. It doesn't really work like that. So there was this American company that took over a Dutch company. And the Americans were already a bit weary about these Dutch, you know, this liberal thinking, et cetera, very liberal thinking. Good English, but liberal thinking, and we don't really understand this too liberal thinking. And there's this book which is called The Untouchables, and it's written by two Americans. I think they were journalists, and they describe the Dutch culture really well. If you're Dutch, it's really funny for a Dutchman to read because you're being held a mirror in front of you. So they thought the solution to this was, let's give all our key employees in this book so they can read it and they can prepare actually in order for them to cooperate. Well, the end of the story is that actually it worsened the situation because the Americans thought the Dutch were crazy, but after reading this book, they knew the Dutch were crazy. So it really works counterproductive. And if you allow me, I'll tell you another story which is from my own experience. I worked for Philips Medical System. It's one of the biggest parts of the Philips company that still exists. And I did this workshop in the Netherlands, and it was a pilot. And this team was run by an American. I mean, you couldn't get more American than he. And so I managed to convince him, okay, let's do this in 2 days. Well, that is a massive amount of time, 2 days. But we did the pilot with key people. And in the end, he also said, yeah, we need 2 days. And he was convinced of the value and the fact that he had to invest money for, okay, fair enough, but also the time. So I did a bunch of workshop, all 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days. So yeah, if you realize the importance of cultural difference and what it can lead to in organizations, you've mentioned a few, then really it's the investment or the fee that you would have to pay me is peanuts in comparison to what you get out of it. Now, of course, the holy grail with any kind of consulting or training or whatever is contributing whatever changed to that one thing. And that's always difficult. You know, how much faster will we go? How much less frustration will we suffer? Maybe we can retain 1 or 2 people more, because otherwise they would have left the company out of frustration. That is expensive. You can put a price tag on that. You know, if you can shorten a project by a week or a month or X amount of time, then that's a profit, that's gain. But it's really hard to put that on this one attribute in terms of doing a 1 day or 2 day workshop. It's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. So you're pointing out the difficulty of impact assessment for work like this, and ideally, you know, it's not even just a workshop, a 1 day or 2 day workshop, but you have, you know, really a strategic plan about an overall engagement approach to working with the organization over time to help them develop their intercultural competencies and communication and decision-making capabilities, you know, and building, you know, taking what they do in the workshops initially and then building it across time and how, you know, they monitor and track things, you know, but that takes even more time and energy, and a lot of organizations aren't willing to do that. Yeah. So it's an interesting conundrum as we try to do this work and try to help organizations better tackle the challenge of working with a diverse workforce. And
you will work with a diverse workforce, or you will work internationally eventually. I mean, of course, not everyone, but many companies, they cross borders, if not in terms of manufacturing, getting stuff from China or Mexico. I mean, or you're hiring people because you cannot find the right people in your own country or your own countrymen, if you want. I see that happening a lot with IT companies. They're importing, I'm making air quotes here, people from Russia, from Mexico, from Ukraine quite a lot. They seem to be quite talented there. So and then yeah, you need to educate those people, but also you need to educate the home people because they will be dominant and they will get as frustrated as well. It's not only the newcomer, the so-called foreigner, who gets frustrated and will go through a period of culture shock, for instance, where at first they think, well, this is fantastic, look at the opportunity I get, you know, I'm going to go to Mexico or the States or Japan or whatever. It's like the honeymoon 2 weeks, and then it's like, my God, it's more difficult. They get isolated, and then you get into this dip, which can cause people to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next. Expat workers, you know, going to a different cultural context, a different country, there's different geopolitical systems, socioeconomic systems, different cultures. I mean, it's not an easy thing. And the research shows that most expat assignments don't pan out very well. In large part because of what you just described. Like people they're not well prepared on how to do it, how to adjust and how to work with within this new context, within this new culture. And then they get there and after the honeymoon phase, they pretty quickly hit a wall. And that's where a lot of people either decide to throw in the towel and quit or go back home, or they stick it out, but they're ineffective.
Yeah.
and they're just miserable. And so it's such a huge challenge for organizations who are trying to embrace diverse uh, workforce and diverse labor pools and bringing
Hmm.
talent in. But what can organizations do to better prepare those people
Hmm.
to actually be successful rather than just immediately launching them into this foreign context where they're really thrown to the wolves or thrown into the deep end of the pool or whatever metaphor you want to use.
Well, it's one thing that you should realize, or that one should realize, is you talk about the expat, but usually it's the expat who suffers generally the least. He will suffer, or she will suffer, but it's usually the partner that causes the expat working to say, I'm leaving here, and
That's
then
right.
the
Yeah.
expat quits as well. So in answer to your question, what can you do? Well, I'm preaching in front of my own choir here. Is that okay? Prepare these people. Let these people know what the cultural differences are. Let them understand that it's a skill that you can learn. There's a model that you can use to explain culture. I use 4 cultural dimensions in order to explain culture, and it puts things in perspective. I mean, I get this aha erlebnis, which is a German word for oh, now I get it. I get this so often. And if you're really good at it, as a company, as an organization, develop an induction program. An induction program where not only they get to know you, here's the bakery and this is your bank card and we've opened an account for you, etc. No, it should be more. There are soft skills to be understood and to be learned as well. And when you do that to the expat worker, include the partner as well, because they also need to know, and it's something both can learn. Kids from 12 and up get this. So and they also have a voice in a family usually. Little kids don't, but from 12 fish on, they tend to get a voice. So include those as well. That's what I would do.
That is great advice, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that's absolutely true, and that's very consistent with my experience.
Hmm.
My family has lived abroad multiple times, and um, on one stint, we were living in Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
and the challenge wasn't for me or for my
Hmm.
children. The challenge was for my wife,
Yeah.
and the social isolation, and um, and that was what we needed to work on and to overcome. And
Mm.
so, even if you have someone, an employee who's very willing and capable, maybe they're experienced in working in different cultures,
Hmm.
the whole family dynamic is a part of that. Or if you happen to be one of those companies that just want to send the partner abroad and not the whole family along with them because of cost reasons, that has all sorts of
Yeah.
negative implications too. So we just
Mm.
have to be thoughtful about it and yeah, provide preparation and training and onboarding and all those sorts of resources, not just for the employee but for the family involved.
Correct. Yeah, yeah, that's what I think as well. I think it's crucial, and you can say maybe okay, why not read a book? Okay, if anything, anything is better than nothing, right? I mean, you can watch YouTube movies, videos as well. The thing is with these cultural differences, it's such a contact sport because it's so subtle. It is not only the focus on why is the word freedom so more important for Americans? Why is that in your constitution? And in what is it, the Pledge of Allegiance, for instance. I mean, that's way too superficial. How we kiss, bow, or shake hands is way too superficial. You have to go a couple of layers deeper because the devil is in the details, and that's where it'll hurt. I understand that you guys carry guns, right? But it's so superficial. I disagree. I come from a different culture. Okay, I know. Okay, shrug my shoulders. Now, do I now know the American culture? No, I don't. No, it's much more subtle. It's much more subtle. And people do realize this. At the beginning of all my workshops, I ask them 3 questions. Who thinks that cultural differences are actually have an influence or matter? Who thinks that they don't matter? Because people can also think, oh, come on, John, you've got 2 eyes and 1 nose and 2 ears. We're individuals. We will work this out. maybe you and I can, but when the group gets a little bit bigger, there will be friction for sure. And then the third question is, are you on the fence? So you're not really sure yet. Everybody who is either on the fence or has said no in the beginning, they always have crossed the fence to that. Yeah, it does matter. It is true. There is something in between us, and you can't really touch it, but it's really tough. I mean, it's like put your hand in water and then lift it up, and then the water goes straight through. But hit the water really hard, and you won't get through. It's that ungrabbable, if that's a word, stuff which is in between us. And you can't help it, and I can't help it. And you can't deny it, and I can't deny it either.
So what advice would you have for organizational leaders, both in terms of their direct approach, but also in creating processes, systems, and such to create, and maintain a company culture that embraces, this idea and understanding of like we need to be more inclusive in our thinking, but we also need to be we need to leverage diversity more effectively, and that requires us to do our work, our homework. That requires us to be thoughtful and self-reflexive about our interactions with each other. What tips would you give to leaders on how to start establishing that kind of a culture?
Okay, well, I think you can segment it, and I've done this with companies as well. Not everybody needs to know everything, right? Think of it as first line people getting in touch, and second line people only maybe over the phone or making appointments and stuff like that, right? So not everybody needs to know everything. I think an organization would be wise to actually include it in some sort of induction program. I mean, you enter a company, you get shown your desk, here's your password, you log in and blah, 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 what have you, here's your phone, here's your laptop, and then what? That's all the hardware. Also pay attention to the software because it's expensive hiring people. Included in your induction program. What's also an idea is even on a temporary basis, depending on the organization, have I call it an integration or a diversity or an inclusion manager, because I can explain how these cultural differences work, but it's really difficult to work with it. And your problem might be different, or you might bump into a problem that we didn't talk about during our 1 or 2 day session. So, and then you can turn to someone like me in this case, who you can contact and say, well, I've got this problem with these Russians because I don't really understand what they're doing. They don't seem to understand. We go over it. I can hold your hand. I can explain it. I can give you concrete tips for this specific context. And then you can go back. You can go back on. So that's also an idea. You can even do that long distance as well. I mean, I don't have to sit next to you as long as I can see you. I mean, what we're doing right now, Zoom, I can hear you. I can see you. You can show me stuff even, So that's how I would approach this.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and I think it doesn't need to be rocket science. No. It doesn't need to be super complex. We need to be intentional about it. We need to be committed to making it a priority. And like you said a few minutes ago, I mean, everyone is going to have experience working with a diverse workforce, whether you ever end up working abroad or not. You're gonna have people maybe on a virtual team, or at least you're gonna have to interact with people cross-culturally in terms of customers or suppliers or something, right? Like everyone. I mean, the world has shrunk. We're all so interconnected. Like, there's just no way that the average person isn't going to have these kind of interactions with people over time, with people with vastly different cultural backgrounds, vastly different upbringings, different ways of thinking and viewing the world. And so we need to put the work in. We just need to be intentional about it. And if we, put our best foot forward, we don't have to figure it out all at once. And we can make incremental improvements, but that requires a commitment, and so as long as organizations can prioritize this enough that it can get regular attention, then we can start making some modest improvements, and then hopefully better and stronger improvements over time. So,
well, and also that companies indeed at least develop some sort of realization that culture matters. It really does matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been a real pleasure talking with you, Chris, and we're about out of time, but I do want to make sure that I give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get in connection with you and learn more about what you're doing in your business.
Okay, all right. That's very simple. You can go to culturematters.com, culturematters1word.com, and everything is there. All my bios, my podcasts are there. It's a bit weird being interviewed right now because usually I would take the lead in terms of a podcast. But you can find me there. There's contact stuff as well. LinkedIn will work as well, but start with the website. That's always good.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage my listeners to reach out to Chris, get in connection with him, and find out more about what he can do for you. If you're doing work abroad, most of my listeners are in the U.S. If you're in the U.S. and you're doing work internationally, there's not going to be many people better than Chris to get in contact with to help you through that process of figuring out how to do it effectively and working with diverse groups of individuals across national contexts. So thanks, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.